May 1945, the war is over. Inside a secret Allied interrogation center known as Aachen, the highest-ranking survivors of the Third Reich are gathered. Field marshals, generals, the very architects of the German war machine. Names like Gerd von Rundstedt, Albert Kesselring, Hermann Göring. Stripped of their power, they sit in simple chairs, smoking American cigarettes. The air is thick with defeat and cheap tobacco smoke. An American intelligence officer enters the room. He carries a single, burning question. He wants to know which Allied commander they feared the most. Was it Bernard Montgomery, the hero of El Alamein? Was it Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme commander? Was it Omar Bradley, the steady, GI's general? Field Marshal von Rundstedt, the old Prussian aristocrat, takes a long, slow drag from his cigarette. He looks at the American officer with weary, knowing eyes. He does not hesitate. Patton, he states flatly. He was the one. We feared him more than the others combined. He continues, his voice a low rumble. Montgomery. We knew what he would do before he did it. He was predictable. Eisenhower. He was a politician, a manager. But Patton. Patton was a demon. He was the only one who fought like us. He was the only one who truly understood the chaos of war. This admission, recorded in a classified report, sent a shockwave through the Allied High Command. For years, Eisenhower and Bradley had worked to control, to temper, and to often sideline George S. Patton. They viewed him as reckless, a political liability, a brilliant but dangerous weapon that could turn in their hands. Yet here, in this hushed room, their defeated enemies delivered a stunning verdict. Patton was not their liability, but the Allies' most potent, underutilized asset. The Germans, masters of the blitzkrieg they had invented, saw in Patton a kindred tactical spirit, and it terrified them. This is the untold narrative of the war, viewed from the other side of the hill. It is a story pieced together from secret diaries, intercepted letters, and the private, post-war reflections of the German High Command. It reveals a consistent, pervasive obsession that spanned continents and battlefields, a question that haunted the Wehrmacht for the latter half of the war: where is Patton? Rommel's first impression: the amateurs are learning. The German fixation with George Patton did not begin on the cliffs of Normandy or in the hedgerows of France. It ignited in the scorching, unforgiving sands of North Africa. In early 1943, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the legendary Desert Fox, was at the peak of his prowess. He had just delivered a crushing humiliation to the U.S. Army at the Kasserine Pass, exposing raw, green troops and hesitant leadership. In his diary, Rommel dismissed the Americans as amateurs, their commanders as timid and painfully slow. Then, the command changed. George S. Patton took over the U.S. II Corps. Almost overnight, the atmosphere shifted. The American retreat stopped. Defensive postures hardened into aggressive patrols, and then into full-scale attacks. Patton imposed a brutal new discipline, enforcing strict uniform codes, including his famed neckties, demanding relentless offensive drilling, and instilling a ferocious will to attack. Rommel noticed the transformation immediately. His intelligence reports began detailing a new type of American commander, a shouting, swearing, relentless figure who drove his men hard and studied Rommel's own book on infantry tactics. The Americans were no longer reacting, they were initiating. In a letter to his wife, Lucy, Rommel betrayed a note of sober respect that replaced his earlier contempt: the Americans are learning fast. They have a new commander. He is not like the others. He risks everything. This will be a different war now. Though they never met face-to-face on the battlefield, Rommel felt Patton's presence as a palpable force. At the Battle of El Getter, Patton's forces, utilizing well-coordinated artillery and tank destroyers, halted the veteran 10th Panzer Division in its tracks. It was the first clear-cut American victory over German armor in the war. From that moment, the name Patton was elevated from just another general on an order of battle to a unique and unpredictable variable in German strategic calculations. He was a problem that could not be solved by textbook solutions. Hitler's paranoia, the ghost army and the wait at Calais. Fast forward to the tense spring of 1944. The Atlantic Wall loomed over the coasts of occupied Europe. The German High Command knew the Allied invasion was imminent, but the critical question of where it would fall consumed them. In his Wolf's Lair bunker, Adolf Hitler pored over maps of France. His strategic instinct, flawed yet rooted in a perverse logic, fixated on strength. He did not respect democratic consensus, he revered the singular, ruthless commander. Hitler told his generals, the invasion will be led by Patton. The Americans would not be foolish enough to leave their best man in reserve. Find Patton, and you find the invasion. This conviction became the cornerstone of German defensive planning and the key to the ultimate success of the D-Day deception, Operation Fortitude. The Allies brilliantly weaponized Hitler's and the OKW's, German High Command, fear. They created the fictitious, 1st U.S. Army Group, Fusag, a phantom force of inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, and fabricated documents, all ostensibly under the command of the famously aggressive General Patton, positioned in southeast England opposite the Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel and the most logical strategic target. Why did this ruse work with such devastating effectiveness? Because it confirmed the German command's own biases. It made perfect military sense to them. General Alfred Jodl, Chief of Operations, argued, it is illogical to attack Normandy. A decisive commander like Patton would attack Calais. He goes for the throat, not the leg. They projected their own doctrine of Schwerpunkt, concentration of force for a decisive blow, onto Patton. They believed that if they were planning the invasion, they would use their best blitzkrieg general to launch the main, war-winning thrust at Calais. Thus, even as the real invasion stormed the beaches of Normandy on June 6, the German High Command remained paralyzed with doubt. Critical reinforcements, most notably the entire 15th Army with its powerful panzer divisions, remained anchored around Calais, awaiting the real attack led by Patton. Field Marshal von Rundstedt later confessed in interrogation, "We were waiting for the main battle. We could not conceive that the main effort would be launched without your best field commander. We were convinced it was a diversion." Patton's reputation, a specter crafted from his past actions and amplified by Allied deception, had become a weapon of mass distraction. It single-handedly pinned down nearly 150,000 elite German troops for 7 critical weeks, buying the Allies the precious time they needed to secure the Normandy beachhead. He had won his first major battle of the campaign without ever leaving England. Where is Patton? The panic of Operation Cobra. The German anxiety reached a fever pitch in late July 1944. The Normandy front had stagnated into a brutal war of attrition in the Bocage country. Then, on July 25, Operation Cobra erupted. A massive aerial bombardment carpeted a narrow sector near Saint-Lô, and American forces punched through the German lines. But the true psychological earthquake came days later. On August 1, the U.S. Third Army was officially activated, and its commanding general was announced, George S. Patton. When this radio transmission was intercepted by German listening posts, a wave of visceral panic cascaded through their command structure. The ghost had materialized, and he was now unleashed behind the crumbling German front. General Gunther von Kluge, commander of German forces in the West, sent a desperate, almost bewildered message to Berlin: the breakthrough is led by Patton. His armor is moving faster than our infantry can retreat. They are bypassing our strongpoints. They are already in our rear. This was the Germans' deepest tactical nightmare realized, Kesselschlacht, the Battle of Encirclement. Most Allied commanders, like Montgomery, fought a battle of material. They advanced methodically, behind overwhelming artillery barrages and with secure supply lines. The Germans knew how to contend with this, a fighting withdrawal, trading space for time, bleeding the enemy white. It was a brutal but familiar calculus. Patton, however, fought blitzkrieg better than its inventors now could. He moved with a velocity that shattered German decision-making cycles. By the time a German division commander received aerial reconnaissance photos, analyzed them, and issued orders to defend a key river crossing. Patton's spearheads were already 20 miles beyond it. He operated inside the German OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, creating a crippling paralysis. General Otto von Manschufel, a revered panzer commander, later wrote with a soldier's admiration, "Patton was the most dangerous adversary. He never allowed us a moment's respite. He exploited every local success, every mistake, with lightning speed. Fighting him was like battling the Hydra. You cut off one head, and two more appeared behind your lines." The German diaries from this period reveal a complex cocktail of dread and a profound, professional respect. They despised their situation, but they admired the artistry of their tormentor. In Patton, they saw not a bureaucrat in uniform, but a warrior, a reflection of their own idealized martial self. The Battle of the Bulge, the wolf woke up too fast. The German perspective on the Ardennes offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, in December 1944 further cements this view. We know the Allied narrative, a desperate surprise attack, the heroic defense of Bastogne, and Patton's stunning relief. Through German eyes, however, the operation was a meticulously calculated gamble. They had factored in the foul weather to neutralize Allied air power, estimated Allied fuel reserves, and critically, they had calculated the reaction time of the American command. German planners estimated it would take the U.S. Army at least 4 to 6 days to reorient its forces from their eastward attacks to a northward counterattack against the Bulge's southern flank. This window was essential for the offensive's success. Patton attacked in two. When first reports of powerful American armored units striking the vulnerable left flank of the German 7th Army reached General Erich Brandenberger's headquarters, they were dismissed as impossible. A mistake, Brandenberger insisted. Those divisions were near Saarbrücken yesterday. They cannot be here. It is a reconnaissance in force, nothing more. Then, identification codes from wrecked tanks confirmed the unthinkable, the Third Army. The atmosphere in German command posts shifted from optimism to sheer dread. A German staff officer recorded in his journal, December 22. "All momentum is lost. Patton has turned the corner. We caught the bear sleeping, but the wolf woke up far too soon." Hitler, in his bunker, raged. How did he move so fast? Why did our intelligence not see this? The answer was both simple and incomprehensible to the rule-bound German logistical mind. Patton had prepared contingency plans for just such an eventuality. His staff had worked on turning 3 divisions 90 degrees in a blizzard, not in 4 days, but in 48 hours. Patton didn't just follow logistics manuals, he bent them to his will. The Germans, for all their tactical brilliance, were ultimately bound by a rigid system. They could not fathom an adversary who treated his own army's bureaucracy as an obstacle to be overcome on the path to victory. The ultimate compliment, he fights like us. There exists a profound and chilling irony at the heart of World War II. The German officer corps, raised in the Prussian tradition of Auftragstaktik, mission command, respected Patton because they saw him as the only Allied practitioner of their own cherished doctrine. Auftragstaktik emphasized decentralized command, giving a subordinate commander a clear objective and the freedom to achieve it as he saw fit, encouraging initiative, aggression, and speed at the point of contact. In contrast, the British and American armies often leaned toward more centralized, top-down control. Patton was the glaring exception. He was an American Führer, leader, in the German mold. After the war, General Otto von Manschufel, while a prisoner, analyzed Allied commanders for U.S. historians. His assessment was stark: Montgomery was a good general, very careful. He would not attack until he had a 5-to-1 advantage. If I fought Montgomery, I knew I had time to think, to prepare. Bradley was solid, dependable, but not surprising. But Patton. Patton was the American Guderian. This was the ultimate accolade. Heinz Guderian was the father of the German Blitzkrieg. To be compared to him by one of his own premier disciples was to be recognized as a master of the operational art of war. Manschufel concluded, he understood the value of time above all else. He understood that a tank is a weapon of terror, not just a mobile gun. He fought like a German general. And that is the highest compliment I can pay. Consider the staggering implication. The men tasked with destroying him believed he was the only adversary playing the game by what they considered the correct rules of modern warfare. The final act, surrender, and a chilling post-war proposition. By 1945, the German army was in its death throes, yet it fought on with a desperate, often bewildering ferocity. While fear of Soviet vengeance was the primary motivator, there was another, more subtle calculus at play. German units began a frantic sprint westward, desperate to surrender to the Americans or British rather than the Red Army. But even in surrender, the legend of Patton dictated their behavior. A captured German colonel explained to his interrogators, "When we heard it was the Third Army opposite us, we knew all argument was over. There was no point in a protracted defense. Patton would not bother to reduce our position. He would simply bypass it with another column, cut us off, and leave us to starve. He did not play those games." A grim saying circulated among Wehrmacht troops in the West: "The British will bomb you. The Russians will starve you. But Patton will simply run you over." In the aftermath of surrender, the captured German generals watched from their prison camps as the wartime alliance fractured and the Cold War dawned. When they learned that Patton was now publicly, and indiscreetly, advocating for the rearmament of German units to join an immediate war against the Soviet Union, their reaction was one of grim, unsurprised acknowledgement. General Franz Halder, the former chief of the German Army General Staff, wrote in a private note, "General Patton sees the geopolitical reality clearly. He understands the Bolshevik threat. He is a soldier, not a politician. It is a tragedy he is not in command. If he led the Western armies against Stalin, many of us would have followed him." This is perhaps the most disturbing testament to the unique, trans-ideological power of Patton's reputation. The generals of the defeated Nazi regime, in their strategic despair, saw in their former nemesis a kindred martial spirit, a commander so purely focused on victory in combat that they were prepared to follow him into a new conflict. It reveals how Patton's identity as a warrior transcended national allegories in the minds of his professional peers, even those of a morally bankrupt cause. Epilogue: The Enemy's Eulogy. In December 1945, news of General Patton's death from injuries sustained in a car accident filtered into the German prison camps. The reaction among the captured generals was not celebration or schadenfreude. It was a somber, respectful silence. Many, including Field Marshal von Rundstedt, took the formal step of having condolences passed to the U.S. Army. The man who had named Patton as his greatest fear stated simply, "He was a great adversary." It is a tragedy for a soldier to die in an accident. A man like that should have died on the battlefield, like a hero. Even in death, they accorded him the honor his own superiors had often grudgingly given. Eisenhower and Bradley found Patton exhausting, embarrassing, and difficult to manage. The Germans found him terrifying, brilliant, and worthy of the deepest professional respect. They feared what he could do, but they admired how he did it. History, as the axiom goes, is written by the victors. But sometimes, the most revealing truths are whispered in the confessions of the vanquished. The German generals lost the war. They were complicit in serving a regime of historic evil. Yet, they were also lifetime students of the craft of war, raised in a tradition that worshipped operational genius. Their collective verdict, delivered in interrogation rooms and private writings, was unanimous. They did not ultimately fear the vast American industrial output, though it overwhelmed them. They did not fundamentally fear the meticulous planning of British generals, though it wore them down. Their most acute fear was reserved for the flamboyant, profane, and utterly relentless man with the ivory-handled pistols and the furious drive. They feared him because he broke their own mold and used it against them. He did not fight like an American general was supposed to, he fought like war itself, unpredictable, ruthless, and fast. General Hermann Bulck, one of Germany's most skilled armored commanders, offered the final, damning summation: Patton was the outstanding tactical genius of the war on either side. I still cannot understand why your high command kept him on such a tight leash. If you had unleashed him sooner and given him the supplies he demanded, the war in Europe would have ended in 1944. The enemy knew. They understood what political and personal friction had obscured within the Allied command, that George S. Patton was the ultimate weapon in the Western arsenal. And in their professional estimation, the Allies were fortunate that the Germans feared him so, but the Germans were equally fortunate that the Allies never fully let him off the chain.